I think you should be able to see the screen now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Should I start the presentation now? It's like 20 minutes, right? You said?
Yes,
20 minutes.
20 minutes. So I'll keep a loose eye on the time, but we've got plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. We'll kind of have each 3 presenters, and then we'll come back at the end for questions. So yeah, 20 minutes, but you know, it's not the end of the world if it overruns a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, please just kick off when you're ready. That would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's see. Wait, something's not working with my PDF. Now, yeah. Okay, let me start very briefly by defining what I refer to with militant research. And even before I start, like, let me say informally that some of these features that I define here, and I will also define it throughout my presentation, I think that they are common not only to militant research, but to activist research or scholar activism or whatever you want to call it, also to participatory action research, to co-research. So there are like a diversity of forms of, let's say, engaged scholarship. That's like kind of the common term that I like to use, that I think that can learn from each other and that share many characteristics, tensions, and challenges. So I hope that we can engage in a productive discussion between these different forms of approaching research that in the end have like very similar goals. But going back to militant research, what I refer to with militant research is basically like a type of approach to research where we understand and acknowledge that knowledge is not neutral, never is, and thus academia is a side of political struggle. So what we do is we take sides. By acknowledging, we decide that we don't want to be just on the side of status quo and support like the research that is going to, or just do research without even trying to ask ourselves what we're contributing to, but we take sides and in this case, the side of like the anti-capitalist struggles. Then another important characteristic is that like knowledge production emanates from within and should support the social movements. So it's not a process of going to try to engage with the social movement. It's like you are simultaneously a researcher, but also like a militant somewhere in a social organization. And it's actually it's not just your own individual curiosity, but it's like the collective needs of the collective, of the organization, let's say, that define the needs of creating or doing this research. And this research, of course, should support the organization, which doesn't mean being uncritical. We'll talk about that later. Then another important feature is knowledge, which is always co-produced, like implicitly, because of course, if it emanates and is defined collectively from an organization, it means that it's always or it should be co-produced. And then like there's like another more specific, let's say, type of methodology for conducting the research, which is militant ethnography, which is a politically engaged participant observation plus ethnography. It's kind of a mix between these two. This is like the specific type of militant research that I used. And in line with the militant research and militant ethnography, it's very important always to like disseminate wide and strategically the knowledge produced and like give back to the communities. But these are like very general like characteristics. And for the rest of the talk, what I want to do is first try to go like with quite a lot of detail through my PhD journey, different cases where I conducted my research, and then like share some reflections. Okay. I started trying to do research around the Coventry Canal because the project where I was hired required me to do some research about urban waterways at the beginning. So I had kind of a tight, framework, and then I tried to adapt to that framework. And since there's like a canal in Coventry, I tried to look for research practice, like common practices around the Coventry Canal and research about them. What I found is that there was not much commoning around the Coventry Canal. So then I tried to kind of create something. Before starting to do some kind of research, I thought, okay, if I have to use this framework, this is what I thought, there's nothing happening. Let's try to create something. So I contacted with like a couple of places. First, the Peace House, which is like self-organized shelter for asylum seekers, and also social center, and CARAG, which is also like a support group, self-organized support group of refugees and asylum seekers, which are just by the canal in the fossil. and we started working together. We got some funding from the Coventry City of Culture, which happened like 1 or 2 years ago, but in preparation for the City of Culture, they kind of offered small grants to community groups for organizing stuff. And the first thing that we did was to organize like a community festival in June 2019 to start kind of creating awareness about, or raising awareness about the canal was there, and that it was actually in a dire situation, and there was like a group of people interested in doing something with the canal. I mean, we still didn't know very well what, but yeah. So wait, you have some pictures here. It was like a huge success. We had like more than 200 people attending, many different groups from the community. It was completely self-organized, and it was like it was great actually, because like many groups of people who were used to just being told what to do and being left behind and had nothing to do, like they were able to just participate, and they were really empowered after this. So what did we do next? We decided to run a guerrilla gardening project by the canal. You can see here like some pictures of us working with some raised beds that we built. In that second project, we got some funding and some support from the Canal River Trust, which things started to complicate things a bit, because of course like the Canal River Trust has its own volunteering, let's say, scheme, and they were trying very well, first subtly, then not so subtly, for us to join their volunteering scheme, because then I guess that for their kind of community engagers, that would be something, there would be some benefit for their employment, I don't know. But well, in the end, what happened is that they kind of created like a bit of a tense situation, and there was like in the end a lack of appropriation of the group, you know, because this internal hierarchies started to show. Of course, with the people from the the Canal River Trust, but also with myself and people from university. I will talk later about that, but we'll see. Trying to erase some of those, let's say, hierarchies and some of those flaws and kind of difficulties in working together as a group, we thought of creating, like, working more on participatory processes and reclaiming an urban park that was like a bit further, like, well, kind of close to that area, to the regular gardening area. But yeah, we wanted to redesign and implement this park. Then we kind of collaborated with some architecture students in trying to design a participatory process, and we got funding again from the City of Culture. Things were going a bit better here because, of course, we involved everyone from the very beginning in defining this project, but then the project was interrupted by COVID pandemic. After a while, we were able to start again, and what we did, I mean, we were not very strong because many of our members were like very affected by the COVID pandemic, and then we joined forces with the Fossil Community Center, which was kind of close, and with a group of people who had started to reclaim like a plot next to the community center and transform it into a garden. What happened there is, again, that there was like a social enterprise that was in charge of that project, and we had to deal with, well, first with I mean, even before dealing with the social enterprise, we had to deal with the management boards of the community center, which was like a council community center, which was very disconnected from the area. It was like a very poor and diverse neighborhoods, and it's a very idiosyncratic place, let's say. And they were people who came from other neighborhoods or even other towns, and they were completely unaware of that, and also not very interested in self-organization. And then again, as I was saying, we had to cope with a social enterprise that, well, they were like, let's say, commissioned this project at first, at least for a few months. And they were, of course, interested in trying to create some kind of dependency. So maybe they could get some extra funding from the city council or from whoever to keep running the project. So, I mean, that clashed again a bit with our aims of self-organizing. But in the end, it kind of worked out pretty well. And we were able to use the garden for other activities, such as storytelling projects, picnics, I mean, of course, a lot of gardening, vegetables that we used, etc. So reflecting on that first case, just to let you know that after more than 2 years working, not academically, but just, let's say, as an activist or as a militant or whatever you want to call it, in all these projects, I never used this academically. because I decided to discard the results because of my political beliefs and personal beliefs. I mean, I mean, thinking back and with hindsight, I think that it was not like a process, an organic process. I tried to, let's say I failed in a sense by trying to force things, and let me reflect a bit about this, about why this happened. So first, as I said, the Coventry Canal was never a top priority of the community. Like I had to kind of push this and like to push this forward because of the rigid project framework, but it didn't really fit the local reality. They needed other things, not just like the Coventry Canal. You know, they had other needs first. Then, of course, even if I lived in Coventry pretty close, it kind of created like a power differential between me and them, because it was me coming from, I mean, someone that they didn't know, coming there and saying, okay, let's organize to create this. I have some funds, some resources that they didn't have. So that was completely wrong and very badly approached, you know, from a militant researcher perspective. Then, of course, when we started to get economic support and resources from different bodies, their funding conditions didn't match many times like the needs of the community. I had to negotiate, being in between, and kind of fight pretty hard to cover some basic things, like trying to cover, like, I don't know, food for each meeting or for each working session, so we could have some food for everyone who came, things like that. They didn't want to, I mean, some funding bodies didn't want to cover that at the beginning. Then, thinking of my project, before I decided to discard all this, it was very, very complicated to deal with ethics approval and ethics assessments, because of course I was dealing mostly with asylum seekers and people in very complex situations. And as I said, dealing with charities and in this case like Cannon River Trust was very complex. There was like, they have this very strong charity-based approach, but they were I mean, in a sense, pretty racist against like the people who was not me, so he was not white. They wanted to control our group. They tried to bribe us, like, okay, if you do this, we'll give you this. So they never were at our side. They were trying to control us and trying, yeah, I mean, I already said that. And again, there was like, we realized that there was like a lot of fund mismanagement. So anyway, as I said, I discarded this and because of scientific integrity, personal beliefs, but that was like a lot of learning. Of course, I tried working with that group out of this framework for the time that I stayed in Coventry, but I decided not to use this for my research. Then the pandemic started, and I was also politically organized in Birmingham, and like organically emerged this group, which was Cooperation Birmingham, which was like basically a mutual aid network that we decided it was already one of our ideas to create that from like, it came from some people from political organizations, but also co-ops and food waste organizations. And we decided to just like hurry up our plans, like push forward our plans and create a solidarity kitchen under the banner of Cooperation Birmingham. It ran from March until more or less August 2020, and sometimes like occasionally after that. And it was a complete success. I mean, we cooked more than 20,000. In the end, it was about 26,000 meals that were delivered door to door. We raised more than 20,000 pounds to do that, and we got more than 200 people involved. There was also several side projects like a newsletter and mass making workshop. We, in the end, after the pandemic, especially, and after the end of the follow scheme, we lost momentum, which gives like a lot to reflect about. And then the need of research, which is very important, as I mentioned at the beginning, emerged from within. So we wanted to think of ways in which this wouldn't be just like a thing, like an organization for some months, that something would stick and would stay. And there was some kind of structure that could actually serve for other purposes in the future. In the end, I actually co-produced like one journal article, one book chapter, like especially, I mean, those two are the academic outputs, and then 3 articles, like non-academic, published in websites and magazines. And of course, many other things, such as discussions in public forums. We created like a mutual aid network in the UK. I mean, there was like a lot that we got out of this research. So in this case, the project had a life of its own, and it's actually still alive. And so the research was in something that I learned from this is that the research, militant research, is inherently contingent. So what does it mean? That there's no use in planning with a lot of detail, because in the end, if you're doing the research from within a social movement and you're following what happens in that social movement, you have a bit to, of course, you can try to plan, but you have to seize the opportunities that come from there. Then again, my job is being an academic and I need to produce academic output. So there was some kind of tension here, because even if I was first and foremost dedicated to Cooperation Birmingham, I also had to dedicate time to framing the research from an academic point of view and to adapt it to the, let's say, requirements and structures, of academic research and my PhD. So there was some tension, because I could have used more time and resources to disseminate more usefully and to work more on Cooperation Birmingham, but I mean, that's there. And also, I realized that the academic publishing process doesn't fit really well with this kind of research, because it's extremely long. It takes, like many months to receive like the first comments to your draft, and then it goes on and on. So it doesn't really match the needs of the organization. So if you actually have to wait until you have like the final version of a paper, I mean, many things have happened in between. I'm running out of time, I think, so I will write soon. So maybe I will skip, I will go very fast for this one. The last one is the Algarrofe, which is already in Badalona. I moved back to Spain, to Catalonia, actually. And this is like a self-organized consumer co-op that is active since the late 2000s in this town of Badalona. And it's composed of like 25 living units, so about 70, 80 people who collectively source ourselves with basic products based on agroecological criteria. And we're in close coordination with a farm in Badalona, so in the same town, and also in direct connection with other 40 producers. We can see here like one of the assemblies that we had. There's like a very sophisticated process of internal organization and democracy in place, because it's been running for a while. But at the same time, there's a general lack of awareness about its political potential and role in social transformation. So the research framework and the research questions emerge in this case partially from within as well, because it was actually my motivation of trying to find like the political potential of this group that had been there for a while. And of course that actually sparked some interest within the group, but it was me who actually brought the question to the group, and they kind of agreed and helped me define and narrow down the research scope. So what are some reflections that I drew from this one? First, like the constant mobility associated with an academic career is like a challenge, because it makes it difficult to establish long-lasting relationships, and you have to start all over again. So after many years working with the people in Coventry and Birmingham, 3 years actually, I had to move because of COVID, and also because the funding of my PhD finished, move back, and then start again with a new group. I kind of already knew some people, but it was something new in the end. And then it's kind of starting all over again to develop these kind of processes of collective inquiry. Then it's also necessary to connect with past research. I mean, I had this need to connect it with the other cases, because it is a part of my PhD. So the research framing, I had to think about that as well. That means that I kind of had to force a bit, or to define a bit like the research question, or I could not accept any kind of research questions from the group. I mean, in the end, it matched, but it was risky. And then finally, in this case, I found that the project had been running already for more than a decade. So I had to complement militant ethnography with other methods. Just some reflections. I compare militant research usually with this ball made of lasting bands, in which you have like a lot of tensions, but the tensions in the end come together at the center and hold everything together. But it's like a very precarious and like equilibrium, balance, that the moment that something actually blows up, maybe the rest of some other bands will just spring up, and then it will be completely disassembled. And some of the issues around here would be like building long-lasting relations, like issues of positionality, of course, privilege, like checking oneself privilege, but also the other's privilege. The issues of career, then you have mobility, funding, concerns about knowledge extractivism, about transformation or potential for social transformation, about commitment and militancy, let's say, and activism. It's kind of, I just wrote some, but there are many tensions that actually form this ball. And one thought is like the very structure of neoliberal academia, like especially based on quantitative goals, like publishing a lot and getting many citations and moving all the time and getting like this traveling all the time, undermines its emancipatory potential. So in the end, something that I share with many authors that have also written about this is that we have to realize that academia is a very relevant site of struggle. So maybe it's important that we not only look outside for, you know, making the revolution or whatever is our goal, but it's also important that we start from within and transform a bit where we're working. And just to summarize a bit all that I said, I found the like 4 main features and 3 main tensions in doing militant research. Like the first, contingency. I already talked about this, but it's hard to make plans, but then it's also easy to seize opportunities. So we have to kind of navigate like what's going on out there, you know, in the social movements. Then ambiguous positionality. It's always there. I mean, of course, at least in my case, I was first and foremost like a militant or a member of the different collectives and groups where I conducted my research, but I couldn't, you know, I couldn't like also abstract myself from the issue, from the fact that I was also like a professional researcher in this case, because I was getting a salary. So, but there's like a positive point in this. Of course, it's difficult to navigate this kind of dual positionality, but we can also take something positive, which is sometimes, especially in my case, because I had like a Marie Curie project, we have a lot of resources, and then we can use that opportunity to to funnel some of those resources to the social movements. So make them, like collectivize them in that sense. For example, I directed money to Cooperation Birmingham to organize several activities, but also to the formation of a People's University in Catalonia. I will just very briefly comment after this. And another feature is like the diverse knowledges, of course. Like it's not just about academic or very intellectual or abstract knowledge. It's also a lot about popular knowledge and different types of knowledge and different types of articulating that knowledge. And all of them are equally important or should be equally important for militant researchers. Also, I mean, in terms of sources, but also in terms of dissemination. We're not supposed to produce only academic papers or publications. We also are supposed to disseminate in many different forms, like in forms that are actually practical and that can help to articulate and to strengthen the movements and the organizations where we conduct the research. And then some aspect like that is usually hidden in research in general is failure. As I explained with the case of Coventry, I faced failure, and militant researchers and researchers in general face failure all the time. But it's even more important in this case because our failure is not only individual. It's not about I did my job wrongly. It's about also failing to the whole collective, or it could be. So it's very difficult to cope with that failure, and we have to maybe escape trying to like this this huge, like very high self-demand and kind of collectivize our thoughts and the ways of coping with this failure. And the tensions, I identified these 3 main tensions. One is that are kind of course, related with the features. Like one is the tension between political organizing and scientific research. I mean, what are we really doing? Or are we trying to do both? I mean, is it possible? Of course, I mean, we try to do both, but many times it's difficult and we have to kind of navigate in between or find the balance between both. Also related, practical versus intellectual knowledge. I mean, we're required to produce intellectual knowledge to advance in, I mean, if we want to build a career in academia, of course, but at the same time, I mean, our motivation and in the first instance, why we started doing this is because we wanted to create practical knowledge that can be used in the field to advance the movement. So again, there's a tension there. And finally, a tension between personal versus collective interest. Again, like my first and foremost positionality in my case was as a militant of the different collectives, but of course I cannot deny that I'm trying to build a career after that. So it's important to be very honest and to always keep like a very strong commitment that cannot even make people doubt about in which side you're on. And I have just a very few other slides, but I think I'm a bit over time. I was just going to show very briefly that there's maybe other ways, other experiments that we can try to do research differently, or to host like militant research in this case, or other types of engaged scholarship, like the case of this People's Self-Organized University that I started together with other people when I came back to Catalonia in 2021. But just to give you an example, this is one of the workshops that we organized together with the Barcelona Lab for Urban Environmental Justice. And this actually brought together about 70 people mostly from social movements, but in Barcelona, social movements against green gentrification and for urban environmental justice, like we said, and fighting against some development projects in the city. And we kind of brought together, based on some research made by this laboratory, we were able to take over the research from our people's university and brought together and organized these sessions of collective reflection and organization and research, and strategy making that have been ongoing so far and have been very productive. So I'm sorry that I don't have time for more explanation on this, but if there are questions, I can expand a bit on this project later. Thanks.